This is the Transport Canada team, Fiorella, Jillian, Christina, and Maeve. And the challenge is, what can the federal government do to ensure supply chain resiliency in the territorial north? Nice, easy jobs, eh? Okay. Take it away, folks.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Maeve McGuire, and just as Chris mentioned, I'm along with my colleagues,
Christina Sorensen,
Jillian Hayden,
to introduce the challenge, how can we ensure supply chain resiliency in the territorial north? I would just like a quick shout out to our Transport Canada team who is with us here today, and also good morning to the judges and all of our colleagues. The importance of maintaining supply chains has become an increasing national concern. Over the past few years alone, millions have been spent to ensure that Canadians have access to goods and services despite major pandemics or wildfires. Yet, as this challenge indicates, Canada's largest and most defining region continues to be left behind. Its more than 150,000 residents, most of whom are Indigenous, face asymmetric challenges that we in the South cannot fathom. Just to name the few challenges that we face, there's elevated risks associated with climate change, the opening of a new trade corridor in the Northwest Passage, and increasing geostrategic competition. Over this past 9 months, we've been grappling with these challenges. And today, we are excited to present 3 proposed initiatives, while not intending to be comprehensive, are rather actionable and consider the social impact of increasing access to this region. Now, I'm going to be passing it on to my colleague Christina to kick off the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
So before we begin today, let us take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather. This institution is located on the traditional territory of the Kanakaka people, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. Throughout this Policy Lab journey, we have continuously reflected on how government initiatives in the South have been complicit in or have failed to address the systemic oppression, specifically of Northern communities, with the notion of for the North and not with the North. We'll first grapple with defining our scope. We defined it in 3 different parts. We first defined it through Transport Canada's mandate. Their mandate is responsible for policies, legislation, and regulatory oversight. They ensure safe, secure, and environmentally responsible transportation for all Canadians. We then defined the North. We defined this a little bit more broadly. It's the provinces and territories above the 55-degree latitude. It encompasses 2/3 of Canada's total landmass. Lastly, we defined supply chains and supply chain resiliency. Supply chains are interconnected networks coordinated amongst various stakeholders, suppliers, transportation networks, and consumer demand markets. But supply chain resiliency is the most important here. It refers to a transport system's ability to absorb disruptions, maintain its core structure, and return to an operating level with acceptable timeframe and cost. While resilient supply chains may incur higher upfront costs, they ensure long-term sustainability by effectively navigating uncertainties and disruptions. Our team grappled with this question, and we found that there's 4 key different hindrances for supply chain resiliency in the territorial north. I'll provide a high-level overview of each one. Our first is due to the North's vast landscape, specifically impacting the modes of transportation. For instance, northern communities depend on air transportation for supplies and emergencies. Coastal communities, on the other hand, depend on marine transport for resupply of goods and services. But this option is only available in the summer season. With limited transportation networks, this leaves communities susceptible to structures that are dominated by a few companies. While some companies are keeping the capital and employment within the region, the limited number of operators reduces the cargo and schedules and increases the cost of these services. Our second key finding was navigational uncertainties. With limited transportation options, and supply chain security is another major challenge faced in the North. The long-standing neglect of remote mapping, surveillance of the Arctic Ocean has led to the generation of inaccurate data, posing serious risk for air, marine, and roadway travel. Incomplete marine data, specifically in the Northwest Passage, forces operators to rely on estimates, leaving coordinate errors up to 4 miles. This can increase shipping costs, delays, and cause several accidents. Operators are unprepared for the increase of Arctic surveillance from strategic competitors as well. This underscores the need for better mapping in this area. The North's changing climate also poses certain challenges and opportunities with the Northwest Passage opening up. However, the challenges are with the dispersion of icebergs, which can cause the increase of collision risks. They also have changing sea conditions, which can increase the shipping times, as well as melting icebergs, which can decrease the visibility in those areas due to fog formations. Our third key finding has to do with climate adaptation. The lack of transportation options, navigational complexities necessitate integrating climate adaptation into the forefront of infrastructure planning and navigation. Omitting adaptation measures presents logistical challenges and increases economic losses for northern operations. Additionally, there's also a need for transportation investments. We must consider that diesel fuels transportation and electricity in the northern communities, for 2/3 of northern communities, in fact. The North also faces an energy inequality, as the cost of maintaining electricity is 10 times higher in the North than the Canadian average. This points towards future strategic investment in the North, ensuring sustainable long-term solutions for environmental and socioeconomic benefits. Our last but not least is the cultural and ethical challenges the North faces. When considering supply chain resiliency, it's important to review the cultural and ethical challenges that present itself. Some benefits for Indigenous people include self-determination, which is crucial for receiving real economic reconciliation. This includes through projects such as procurement, access to business capital, ownership, and different projects within the northern area. However, increasing accessibility in the North also presents its challenges for these communities, with increasing crimes like human trafficking. Northern Inuit women are particularly susceptible to this, and some northern airlines have recognized this issue and increased awareness through in-flight pamphlets. However, there is a lack of region-specific initiatives to anticipate the increasing crime rates. As such, human trafficking, and this will only exacerbate existing reporting issues. I'm now going to pass it off to Fiorella, who's going to go over our policy framework as well as introduce our policy recommendations. Thank you.
To help us create the solutions for the challenging policy question in the vast territory we encounter, we created this framework of pillars and a principle to guide us through the process. We decided recommendations will be driven by one foundational principle, reconciliation with Indigenous people, making it a fundamental component of every aspect of our policy proposals. This involves acknowledging the historical injustices that Indigenous communities have faced due to targeted harmful policies against them. These actions have had long-lasting impacts, making it imperative that any government initiative incorporates Indigenous peoples as equal partners. To move forward constructively, it is essential to respect traditional knowledge and empower these communities to decide when, how, and if they want to undertake these projects. We also identified 3 pillars that guided us in the design of the solutions: risk management, climate adaptation, and capacity building. The first pillar involves identifying potential risks in the supply chain and implementing strategies to mitigate them. In northern communities, preparedness and response capacity are essential to effectively recover from disruptions. By prioritizing risk management, the goal is to foster a resilient supply chain that protects the well-being and prosperity of Northerners. Pillar 2 involves anticipatory and reactive policies to address the challenges posed by climate change. This is particularly significant due to the high cost and feasibility concerns of infrastructure planning in such extreme environments. By integrated climate adaptation strategies, we can reduce the need for costly repairs and avoid supply chain disruptions. Finally, the third pillar, capacity building, is crucial because it equips communities with the skills and competencies needed to implement these tailored solutions. A key aspect of this pillar is cultural competency, which involves the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situations. Fostering these skills creates a toolkit that enables the successful implementation of programs, ensuring that they are culturally sensitive and community-specific. In light of this framework, we developed 3 policy recommendations, laying them out in 3 different themes. Restructure Now focuses on adapting pre-existing funding into innovative and adaptable solutions, with intention to modernize and reinforce northern transportation hubs. For this objective, the recommendation we created is called the Northern Air Gateway Improving Initiative, which targets critical infrastructure by implementing a new process and leverage available projects. This is followed by Navigate Ahead, which aims to scale up the capacity to address security and navigational gaps in marine transportation routes. The recommendation that cover this is the Arctic Response and Surveillance Enhancement, which will improve maritime capabilities and ensure safe and efficient navigation through the northern waters. Finally, with Secure the Future, we seek to foster resilient communities through regulatory mechanisms, training, and partnerships. It focuses on addressing human trafficking, ensuring that the communities are not only resilient, but also safe and secure. We intend to tackle this issue through the third recommendation called Prioritizing Northern Community Safety, which targets the emerging vulnerabilities in supply chain that the communities face by creating a new regulatory oversight in the transportation sector. Now, to continue with a more in-depth description of the programs, I'll pass it on to Maeve that will introduce Recommendation 1. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiorella. I'm pleased to kick off our first initiative, the Northern Air Gateway Improvement Initiative. We are incorporating both practical yet innovative projects to northern airports, which are the operational lifelines to this region. These improvements include airport runways, airport lighting fields, as well as field and community applications. All of these are foundational to any future improvements. I'm pleased to expand on 1.1, while my colleague Christina is going to expand on 1.2 and 1.3. There are 2 types of runways that make up the northern airport alignment, and these are either gravel or asphalt. Gravel are 83% of these, and these are typically in those smaller airports. However, gravel requires more upkeep, and there's 2 projects that we're funding under this initiative. The first is maintaining a critical volume stockpile of gravel, and then second is incorporating a dust palliative or a dust spray. Given the outlined supply chain issues, as my colleagues previously touched on, we say that maintaining a critical stockpile of gravel is important for allowing frequent grading and maintaining a standard of maintenance. This will improve takeoff and landing efficiency. Meanwhile, a dust palliative controls the dust that is created from any airlines landing on the strips. So when they impact the runway, it comes off and it impacts visibility as well as creates health issues because you're adding particulate matter into the air. So by having a dust palliative funded, it not only increases the surface strength by controlling those dusts, but it also is resilient to extreme temperatures, making it a northern specific solution. Additionally, it's biodegradable and non-corrosive to any aircraft, so this is going to be a long-term solution. I'm excited to pass off into the asphalt category for overlaying, and these are 15% of runways, and they're typically those large operational hubs. Think about a Callaway or Yellowknife, for example. The available project is a regular maintenance project, which is mandatory overlays. However, that typical lifetime in the South, which is 15 or 10 years, is shortened extremely in face of the weather challenges in the North. Therefore, we need adequate funding for overlays more in the 7 to 10 year range, not only to maintain those airports' efficiency, but also because those airports are serving those smaller hubs, it's going to impact them as well. I'm now pleased to present Christina, who is going to take over for 1.2 and 1.3.
Thank you so much, Maeve. So 1.2 is maintaining and supporting lighting projects is essential for safe flight conditions, equipping pilots with visual information for takeoff, landing, and taxiing. Lighting lifespans are a public safety concern. This is why our recommendation of NAGI offers funding for adequate stockpiles and maintenance. Poor access to parts needed to maintain these systems' effectiveness can shorten their lifetime. If an airport does not have sufficient stockpile bulbs, for example, the maintenance team may be forced to wait months, and depending on the season, before it receives its replacement parts. Further, the North's harsh environment can contribute to faster deterioration of lighting systems, and severe weather conditions like heavy snowfall and icing reduce the life expectancy of such systems. While the industry average is about 15 years, northern airports must account for differing climate realities in the north. There's an additional proactive measure under NAGI is the funding of the portable lighting, a necessary mitigation tool for large airports to prevent emergencies and accidents. This measure reflects concerns about territorial airports not being on the national grid, as well as their reliance on diesel supply due to that energy inequality in the north, which was mentioned prior. Having backup lighting will contribute to reducing energy inequality that northern communities experience and will also be a significant stabilizer for emergency preparedness. Our last, and certainly not least, 1.3 is TC's grants and contributions team design. This is very important to support community applications under NAGI. It is fundamental that the team has appropriate cultural competencies required for this. This will occur through an organizational needs statement that encompasses Northern Indigenous hiring requirements, as well as it will support communities in defining their operational capacity and allow for considerable considerations like flexible funding formulas to enable meaningful participation. I'm now going to pass it off to Maeve, who will introduce our second policy recommendation.
Back again. I am pleased to also announce our second initiative, the Arctic Response and Surveillance Enhancement. This is a twofold initiative, first with C2C2C, which I will be presenting, and then my colleague Jillian will be presenting Mapping for the Future. This is going to anticipate pressures on the northern corridors with the opening up of the Northwest Passage, and the goal of these programs is to not only increase capabilities, but navigability of the entire region. C2C2C seeks to enhance regional capabilities by first, creating a new Crown Corporation, the Arctic Pilotage, then second, purchasing a UAV to be stationed in the north. A pilotage authority comprises of a group of pilots who have localized expertise in the region and will help ships navigate through difficult waterways, as well as prevent any major accidents from occurring. Currently there are 4, and for any Arctic operations, they're going to be diverted up there. But as we previously highlighted, we're projecting more increase in traffic. Specifically, there's been a 160% rise in bulk carrier mileage in the Arctic Ocean from 2013 to 2019. Not only will this project help protect operators, but it's a geostrategic measure, which allows the government to identify who's exactly in Canadian waters. Additionally, under this recommendation, we ask that the Minister of Transportation will appoint Indigenous Northerners to at least half of the pilotage board authorities. This will not only support Indigenous decision-making power, but as the board sets the strategic vision, but it allows localized and traditional knowledge to be integrated in any evaluation of the Arctic pilotage performance. Now on to the second sub-recommendation under this initiative, which is the procurement of a UAV to be stationed in the north. Currently, UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles, are used in transportation projects in the south for environmental monitoring. However, they can serve a pivotal role in this region by helping with search and rescue operations, collecting infrastructure data, as well as, just as I previously mentioned, environmental monitoring. Additionally, it can incorporate AI to update missions, and this will allow Canada to have that complete edge. TC should be acquiring and stationing one in the north, given the size of the region and the labor gap, and it will position Canada's defense capabilities to be able to protect the north. Currently, we do have capabilities, but these are stationed in Nova Scotia and British Columbia, and while they can be diverted to the north, this isn't going to be supporting an emerging northern corridor. Now, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Jillian to finish the rest of these recommendations.
Thank you, Maeve. So, from our research, we actually discovered that the moon and Mars are both better mapped than the Arctic Ocean, which is crazy to think about. So, to best protect Canada's Arctic sovereignty, we must first understand the Northwest Passage. This is what led us to make this or create this initiative, Mapping for the Future. So, to begin, we recommend that Transport Canada should prioritize replacing single beam charting technology with multi-beam systems on northern vessels to enhance navigational capabilities. Implementing multi-beam sonar on vessels operating in unmapped northern waters will revolutionize seabed data collection overall. Multi-beam sonar technology, which uses a wide array of sound beams to measure depths across extensive areas simultaneously, provides highly detailed and accurate data of the seabed. Unlike single beam sonar that maps the seafloor with just one transducer, as you can see in the image, multi-beam sonar will send out multiple beams in a fan-shaped pattern. This will enable comprehensive mapping of underwater features such as ridges, canyons, shipwrecks, and mineral-rich areas for crucial and safe navigation. So as you can see, the multi-beam will pick up a much higher area than the single beam. It's actually approximately 100 times the efficiency than a single beam that is currently used in most of Canada's waters. So to complement the multi-beam system, we are recommending that TC also integrate an AI alert system into marine navigation. This system will analyze the extensive data collected by multi-beam systems and provide real-time insights and recommendations to vessel operators. By leveraging machine learning algorithms, the AI system can detect potential navigational hazards, such as shallow waters, submerged obstacles, or changes in seabed morphology, and alert operators to take corrective actions to avoid accidents in the long run. Continuous analysis and updates of navigational data by the AI alert system will enhance situational awareness and reduce the risk of maritime accidents in the north. So moving on to sea, it's incredibly important to note that this will require respectful and diligent collaboration with Indigenous communities along the Northwest Passage, approximately 1,300 nautical miles. Several Indigenous communities live, that's where their home is, that's where they hunt for their livelihoods and fish, and we do not want to harm that in any way. So it's best to create boundaries ahead of time before mapping begins. Okay. So moving on to our recommendation number 3, prioritizing northern community safety, I will begin by outlining 3.1, liability insurance coverage requirements. So citing section 86(1)(c) of the Transportation Act, this recommendation advocates for integrating anti-trafficking compliance requirements into liability insurance coverage for air services and aircraft in Canada. Transport Canada should adjust airline insurance policies to account for the risk of human trafficking in air travel. This recommendation mandates that Canadian air service providers and aircraft operators obtain certification from unbiased third parties to ensure compliance with anti-trafficking standards and consistent auditing. The certification process could include thorough background checks of employees, regular training in identifying and preventing human trafficking, and implementing transparent labor policies as well. Liability insurance policies will also require regular audits by independent auditors to ensure ongoing compliance with anti-trafficking measures. So to incentivize anti-trafficking standards, which is incredibly important, we know that unprompted, the private sector is unlikely to do something right away. So we would like to incentivize anti-trafficking standards by introducing a risk-based premium adjustment system to be implemented. This system would offer reduced premiums to companies demonstrating strong compliance with anti-trafficking standards, while those failing to meet requirements could face higher premiums or no denial of coverage completely. Liability insurance policies would also mandate ongoing training and awareness programs for all employees, covering the identification of trafficking indicators, reporting procedures, and legal obligations. So moving on to 3.2, the Northern Protection Initiative to combat human trafficking. So unlike the first initiative, this initiative will call all will cover all streams of transportation. So this will be led by TC in collaboration with the Canadian Border Services Agency and Public Safety Canada. This initiative will focus on training transportation personnel to identify and respond to human trafficking incidents, establishing real-time reporting mechanisms as well. It's really crucial to implement survivor-led detection training throughout this process. So the Northern Protection Initiative will aim to equip transportation personnel with specialized training to identify and respond to human trafficking incidents. This includes developing and delivering comprehensive training modules for airline, truck, and rail staff, incorporating real-life scenarios and role-playing exercises to understand the different trends and risks regarding trafficking. Collaborative learning sessions with law enforcement and victim support agencies should be facilitated throughout this process. Crucially, education materials will be created with input from survivors in human trafficking to ensure the content is both accurate and empathetic. This initiative will provide ongoing education opportunities to keep personnel updated on latest trends and best practices across Canada. So just to add on to 3.2, covering educational campaigns and reporting mechanisms. The Northern Protection Initiative will also focus on raising awareness through educational campaigns tailored to Northern communities' needs. Working with Indigenous leaders and organizations, these campaigns educate on human trafficking, risks, and signs, considering each community's cultural and linguistic context. Programs include informational sessions and workshops in schools, community centers, and local venues. The Northern Protection Initiative, through survivor-led training, robust reporting mechanisms, and tailored educational campaigns, aims to combat human trafficking in Northern communities. However, I'll go back to B. I think I skipped right to C. So I'll go back and cover reporting mechanisms. It's incredibly crucial that across all transportation, the same reporting mechanism is in place, and all transportation personnel know the steps to take and what to follow through with when they are calling that hotline. It's incredibly important because there's a lack of data, especially on human trafficking in the North. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just very poorly captured. So we want to work on understanding the issue further and being able to provide policy to help support them. So I'll pass it on to Fiorella to go through our implementation plan.
So, as my colleagues explained, we designed 3 recommendations to achieve a resilient supply chain for Northern communities. Each recommendation is designed to be independent, ensuring that success in one is not contingent on another, while all being equally important. The plan includes timelines ranging from 2 to more than 5 years, with a total cost of $272 million for 5 years. We consider recommendation 1 to be a medium-term solution, deployed in 3 to 5 years, with an estimated cost of $39 million annually. To implement it, TC will need a robust evaluation practice to support transparency in the project selection process, a necessary precondition for partnering with local communities. As per recommendation 2, we envision it being a long-term policy, with a total estimated cost of $71 million over 5 years. Something to consider in the process of creating a pilotage authority is that it will require a large investment in time and resources by TC. Legislative changes to create a crown corporation requires a variety of experts to announce, propose, and integrate the pilotage. Also, integrating advanced multi-beam sonar systems into Northern vessels will require a significant financial investment, addressing logistical challenges too. Recommendation 3 will be our short-term proposal, considering implementation of 2 to 3 years with a total cost of $3.3 million as a whole. Developing training programs involves significant investment and careful coordination with survivors and victim support systems, necessitating time and consistent federal efforts to build trust. We will finally recommend a comprehensive evaluation approach for each component under the federal policy and results, establishing relevant indicators to monitor effectiveness across varying timeframes. Although the Canadian North is a cornerstone of national identity, its well-being and security continues to be jeopardized by formidable challenges. Central to government efforts to meet these challenges is ensuring supply chain resiliency. Our three-part strategy addresses the long-standing neglect of Northern-focused policies, while promoting indigenous reconciliation and community participation in decision-making and development. With this, we aim to support sustainable growth and prosperity in Northern communities, enable them to effectively navigate evolving challenges and seize future opportunities. As we conclude, we want to thank our sponsor, Transport Canada, for all their constant support that was of great help through the process, our stakeholders and right holders for sharing so many insights during their interviews, and finally, our coach, Vincent Rigby, for being a rock this whole time. Thank you so much for being here and listening.
Thank you. Okay, well done. All right, let's go to the judges. And again, I'll let you figure out who starts.
Yeah, I thought that was a very nice presentation. I like the fact that it covers quite a wide range of different issues, and both the technical and the sort of broader societal issues. I mean, I guess that's maybe the source of my question is that you talked about some of the trade-offs between the importance for the indigenous communities of having more resilient infrastructure so that it creates opportunities for them and promotes economic reconciliation, versus the fact that some of the steps that you might take to improve resiliency might have negative impacts on some of those same indigenous communities. So I guess what I was wondering, stemming from that, you presented your Northern Air Transport resiliency initiative, and you had a set of proposals. Sort of wondering, in developing those proposals, were there some that you discarded, let's say, because of did you think about a wider range and then kind of home in on ones that would have fewer negative impacts on the communities? I mean, was that kind of a guiding principle in selecting the ones you had, or does the sort of impact assessment really come more in terms of the implementation of the initiatives? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Just to clarify, this is the question about Program 1, the Northern Air Gateway Improvement Initiative. Perfect, thank you. Well, thank you so much. We are targeting specifically those runways and lighting systems because we saw those as the actual nuts and bolts in safety. And your question is actually why we created 1.3, that grants and contributions team. So we are actually asking Transport Canada to create this team that's not only going to be funding applications, but is actually going to establish a community presence, and that's how they're going to field applications. It's on the communities to be applying for this, but Transport Canada needs to actually have a presence within these communities and know what's the issues on the ground. So that's really why we had 1.3. And to ask about specifically why we're targeting, again, those runway and lighting initiatives, we find that while there's funding and also other huge issues, such as, for example, electrical units on the fields, we're just thinking in terms of pure safety, as well as taking into account that some of these runways are probably as long as this room right here. So it's very short runways. And we want to make sure that all Northern communities have access to this. So we really were just picking the basic components that all these types of communities can be asking for funding for, as well as those innovative solutions like dust palliatives, which are actually going to be helping maintain those over a longer period of time and help scale up innovation. So yeah, thank you so much for your question.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. This is not an area that I'm too well versed in, so this was very helpful, very informative. Thank you. I did read through the presentation, and this doesn't relate directly to your recommendations, but in your presentation, you talk a lot about energy inequality. I mean, you mentioned it 2 or 3 times to start off your presentation. So I'm just wondering, you mentioned there's opposition to diesel, but they're reliant. There's opposition to SMRs. I'm wondering if you did any research or any look into alternative energy options and how that can help create a more sustainable North.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yeah. During our research, we discovered that these communities are over-reliant on diesel, right? So we were trying to also look for alternative energy sources And SMRs was one of the ones that stakeholders mentioned repeatedly. So we figured that this is a solution that needs actually to be studied a bit more. And also other kinds of energies like hydro or any other senses are not really within our scope, which is why we didn't have like an actual recommendation on these ones. I don't know if anyone wants to repeat. Okay. Yeah.
Additionally, we looked into wind as well as solar as well, but these are again like under-researched, underfunded. There are certain projects that TC is currently funding to look at alternative energy sources, which is actually happening currently. But again, there's not a northern specific aspect to some of these research funding projects, so that's also something that we had to consider as well.
Great presentation, thank you. And just kudos on really focusing on what needs to happen, needs to be with, not for, because that historically has been a problem, so thank you for that. My question has to do with the role of Transport Canada as one part of a much larger federal government. Were there conversations about how to combine what Transport Canada might be able to do, what we might be able and maybe should be doing with national defense, with issues related to Arctic sovereignty, especially given all the activities of the Russians up north, which have been expanding dramatically over the last few years. But I would also, it's also, a lot of the transportation challenges are related to health, right? Evacuating people who are in need of medical treatment. The more we engage in digital remote health, that's ISED, for example. So just a question, how much did you address the opportunities, sometimes challenges, but the opportunities of Transport Canada working with other parts of the federal government to share costs, to share strategies, to share any of these issues, frankly?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We definitely do see an opportunity with at least the 2024 defense update, if anyone has had a chance to look at it, specifically with the northern operational hubs. Now, amidst all of the pages in the defense update is this very tiny recommendation of creating northern operational hubs. And while we can't automatically say that Transport Canada can partner on this, just given it's only 3 or 4 sentences in a huge report, it's going to, the northern operational hubs are looking to increase infrastructure such as, you know, like the FIRST program. So there is an opportunity for Transport Canada to be partnering. Now, additionally, as we were mentioning with those defense updates in the second program, so like the UAV, the AI navigation technology. Now that also dovetails nicely with defense. And especially given that I believe maybe 2 weeks ago, NATO was saying that we're underspending on our defense, Transport Canada does have the opportunity to be building with defense in that region. Now, for this alone, we are just within the scope of Transport Canada, but there's definitely going to be partnership opportunities going in the future. So yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to add on a little bit. Under the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework, which is a huge guiding framework for Northern development, that is in partnership with some other federal departments, such as Crown and Indigenous Services, Global Affairs Canada. So a lot of those are actually working together with working groups to kind of have development projects in the north. So there's already kind of that infrastructure that's already there. I think a lot of these initiatives that we're proposing as well does have some stemming points which can increase integration, as Maeve has already mentioned. So I think that's another kind of aspect to consider as well.
Thanks. I'm interested in your focus on airports. And I just had the most amazing experience just last September to travel through the Northwest Passage and spend time in the north. So I know just enough to be dangerous, I suppose. But, you know, as the Northwest Passage opens up, you have focused kind of a lot on air and resiliency to communities by air. But that's a very expensive way to operate, and it's much cheaper, although slower, of course, to focus on the marine area. And you did touch on that. But there's some big elements around kind of marine transport with, ice-free ports and facilities for loading and unloading and things like that, which would have resiliency in a longer term perspective than air. Can you tell us a little bit about your observations on that?
Yeah. Thank you. We are incredibly jealous that you got a chance to go through the Northwest Passage. We've been asking the school, so maybe ask it again during this presentation. But either ways, yeah, so we definitely see your point. Right now, though, the government is already investing in scaling up marine operations. For example, multi-purpose vessels, MPVs, I think there's going to be 11 built in the shipyards in British Columbia and are going to the north actually to serve it. We see the real gap in air, and that's why we focused in on air. And, but to your point, yeah, we need that scale up with the marine services. So we're looking to complement that. Additionally, there's also a lot of more investment in the Coast Guard services, as well as getting more icebreakers and the likes that are going to support those operations. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's turn it over to sponsors. And we've got 3 representatives with us from Transport Canada. So how about if I just pass the microphone to one of you 3.
Okay. So I thank you for your presentation and all the work that you guys have done and presented some, I'll say, interesting ideas for sure that we're going to take back and look forward to further conversations on it. And I appreciate the conversations from the judges and some of your responses. Bang on ANPF. I mean, we work really closely with our partners, and I'll add Canor to that one as well. So air is really important, and I've just been up in the Yukon a couple of times over the past couple of months, and it is the only year-round mode of transport right now, and we know that there are a lot of problems, and people are looking at the dust suppressants as well, but it's costly. So I do take the point that it is costly, and I look at your numbers, and it seems really attractive. So I'm just wondering, what metrics do you use to cost this?
For which program specifically?
The air. So you had, 197.5 million over 5 years.
Yeah, so right now we are basing it off of a fund that's going to be complementary to other funds with Transport Canada. The difference in that this particular fund is it's going to be northern focused. So that's really going to dedicate to the north and scale up those efficiencies. Yeah, it does look really attractive number-wise, which thank you. Yeah, but this is going to be one of those bridging moments where the government needs to have increased investment. So we are actually just building the foundation. So yeah, it's an attractive number, but we're also anticipating that there's going to be different initiatives that the government's going to be dedicating more time to the north too. And we're trying to just build up these critical hubs. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on that through these recommendations and the numbers you are seeing, they're based on case studies, industry averages, and our approximate timeline on how long it would implement each recommendation.
Also, to tackle on to this one, it's an adjacent project to ACAP, which is the Airport Capital Assistance Program. That's not northern specific, as well as reviewing some reports. It has stayed at the same rate every year and has not matched inflation. So in this case, we've kind of taken that total and kind of reallocated it towards just north. So that is kind of the way that we've also done this process as well.
Okay. Thanks. I'll pass it to my colleagues.
Thank you so much. I'll just echo Janice's comments. It's clear that a lot of thought and meaning went into this work, and we couldn't ask for a greater team to take on such a big question for sure. And I just want to say I love how you've structured out the different programs, and they make sense to me. But I wondered, because of course these are nothing can be done overnight. It would be great if we could have an overnight solution, but we can't. So if we were like Transport Canada is on board, what would you advise being the first step that the department should take to kickstart everything?
Yeah, of course. I can speak to programs 2 and 3 for first steps. Maybe Maeve or Christina could speak to program 1 as well. So for program 2, just beginning, the charts that we've seen from different members of the Coast Guards across various fleets are incredibly outdated. Some are dating back to the 1800s, actually, specifically in the north. So that, combined with the increase in use of the Northwest Passage, is incredibly scary. So I would recommend, our team would recommend that you begin looking at that as soon as possible and looking at different mapping advancements. Do you want to add on to one?
For the policy suggestions under the first initiative, so this is quite boring, but hiring. So the first thing that we would ask would be that grants and contributions team be immediately onboarded, because it's really important that we actually get members of Transport Canada within those communities. That not only is going to help with just funding applications in general, but it can also ensure that the program is actually meeting those needs on the ground. So yeah, thank you.
And then I'll come back in and talk about recommendation 3, just very briefly. Again, hiring and a due diligence and research, especially in the north. Linguistic needs, contextual needs, it will all depend on where you implement the education plans. We also hope to better understand the insurance framework soon. So increased efforts towards implementing a more robust insurance framework for airplanes would be incredible.
Thanks so much.
So I guess I'll echo my colleagues and just say it was incredible working with such an enthusiastic bunch. Like, you were so prepared to answer our questions and just so insightful throughout this whole process. So thank you for that. And my question is, what metrics or evaluation methods are going to be used to assess the success or the impacts of each of the programs?
I love this question because Leslie's sitting right there and I took her class, so it's great. So we actually made an evaluation standard for our programs. We really want it to be utilization focused, because we know that obviously the Northerners, we want to put them first in this sense. So obviously having their insights and input in towards kind of like a feedback loop, as what's working, what's not, how can we improve this? I think that would be the best way to go forward. We also looked at certain reports from the Auditor General, and unfortunately for the National Trade Corridor Fund, there's been a little bit of a lacking of transparency in terms of kind of tracking and evaluating certain programs. So I think kind of having that as a standpoint for evaluation would be kind of crucial in this matter, and making sure that the funding is actually going towards what is necessary and to reallocate if not as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, let's open it up to anybody else. Coaches, faculty, student. Oh, Vincent, coach. I don't get a microphone. Oh, there was no. This way you'll be a little bit shorter.
I want to make sure that my new nickname at the school is The Rock. So thank you, Theo. I appreciate that. I give it an A+++, but I'm probably slightly biased. But I had a question, but Martha stole it, unfortunately. It was about other government departments and national defense, in particular the defense update. So I thought you gave a great answer to that. But let me ask you a question. Jillian, you just mentioned case studies. Yeah. So Canada is one of 8 Arctic countries. Could you talk a little bit about the case studies, the work that you did with respect to other Arctic countries, U.S. and Alaska, Sweden, Norway, Denmark? What did you learn from those case studies? And are any of these specific initiatives built on some of the things that we're seeing in other countries in the Arctic and the northern regions? And how are we faring compared to those other countries? Are they ahead of us, behind us? Be curious. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll get started on a couple programs and then feel free to add on for program 1. So we were actually incredibly lucky to meet with ambassadors from Finland, Norway, and Iceland. We got to look at different opportunities regarding Arctic mapping, protection, and reconciliation as well. So we also spoke with the Department of Homeland Security in the U.S. on their Blue Lightning initiative that inspired some of the factors in Program 3. They actually almost had WestJet and Air Canada on board with the U.S. human trafficking program, so we're hoping that WestJet and Air Canada would hop on board with Canada's. We had a lot of fun putting together various case studies to looking at SMEs. Yes. SMEs. Sorry, I always mess up that acronym every time I say it. It's been 6 months. Yes. So we did a cross comparison specifically with Russia as well, and we noticed that some of their vessels include nuclear technology. We are not up to date at all with Russia's nuclear icebreaking technology. We have one vessel up in the north currently, the St. Louis. Russia has eight of these massive nuclear icebreakers, so it's definitely a point where we see that we could increase our capacity on. I'll let Maeve talk about Program 1 as well.
Yeah, but before we go into that, I was surprised I didn't get a lot of UAV questions, but I'll just give my UAV piece. So the unmanned aerial vehicles, actually, I was inspired by the recent NATO exercises about a couple of weeks ago, which included Norway, Sweden, the United States, all those big Arctic players. And they were testing UAV technology alongside that AI implementation tool. Now, Canada is incredibly behind in that respect. And if we want to ensure that Canada is going to be a leading player in the Arctic 7, we need to make sure that our capabilities are matching up with the rest of our allies. And in terms of the first program, we had wonderful case studies from Alaska. A lot of their rural airports face similar challenges to that in Canada. And dust palliatives have been, for example, sorry, I go on about dust palliatives, have been integrated since 2005 into construction projects, which is quite a long time. And also portable lighting has been integrated for about, I believe, 10 to 15 years. So shout out to Alaska for a wonderful case study. And yeah, thank you so much. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Open it up to questions from anybody. If judges want another question, or faculty, or students. Yes, all right.
Former student. So thank you for your presentation. My question was around, I think it was recommendation 2.1. You're proposing of the creation of a new crown corporation,
Yes.
if that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm curious what the rationale is behind that. Do you see any potential challenges with, further bureaucracy and all of that versus like maybe hosting some of the programs elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So the reason why we're creating a Crown Corporation for the Arctic pilotage is because under the Pilotage Act of Transport Canada, we have to create a Crown Corporation. There's currently 4 Crown Corporations, so it's Atlantic, Pacific, Laurentian, the Lakes. And as I was mentioning in the presentation, they're getting diverted to meet those Arctic challenges currently. But again, because we're anticipating that scale up, we want a specific targeted pilotage for the Arctic. Now, I was connected from Neil, who is not here, unfortunately, on the transport. Different Neil thing. different Neil. Although Neil Bauer did help. So thank you. Yeah, he emailed me. He was in Australia emailing me about the creation of a new Crown Corporation. So thank you for that. But Transport Canada Neil connected me with someone internally from Transport Canada, the Crown Corps team. And it is actually achievable in 5 years. We're leveraging that political will that's there for scaling up in the north. And additionally, the pilotage, although it's a big deal to create a Crown Corporation, I'm not trying to undersell that whatsoever, you're having an ad hoc, hiring of pilots and a board of 6 members, which if we're leveraging our political will correctly, we can do pretty quickly in that 5-year timescale. Yeah, so thank you.
Last few minutes. Any other questions? Does anybody have a question about a critical stockpile of gravel? I never thought I would hear that described in a policy lab, but I loved it. A critical stockpile of gravel? No questions. All right, yes.
Hi, do you mind if I borrow the microphone? I don't mind at all. Thank you so much. Hi, so thank you so much. First of all, the Dust Palliative Initiative sounds great and will actually complement many of the ideas already going through Canada's innovation sectors. So having worked in Canada's innovation sectors as well, I wanted to ask about the funding question about how are you going to make sure that people actually apply if you create these funding sectors. One of our largest challenges in Canada is that most SME funds are not being applied to at the moment, leading about $50 million that go under that don't go out every single year that gets refunded, and also to international partnerships. With a population concentration such as with populations in the north, how are you going to make sure that accessibility barriers are mitigated so that people could access these funds that are very well explained, but often have been unaccessed in other areas of Canada, whether in domestically or even with international partners, with some of even our greatest trading partners and other innovation agents?
Such a beautiful question, honestly, and well worded too. I think for this, it would fall onto the grants and contributions team. And I think there's a reason why we definitely place this. We do see a role for Transport Canada to kind of aid and ensure that applications are well filled out and that they're receiving the funding that they need. I think a lot of times there's certain barriers that we don't really fully understand. Accessibility barriers such as language, understanding what certain languages mean. And I think the government is actually innovating to be a little bit more accessible towards all Canadians. So I think that is definitely their role to play, as well as they'll be on the ground in the north. And I think having that northern understanding is something that can be somewhat lacking. So having that on the ground, kind of seeing the state of the airports and what's happening, I think will give them a better understanding when they're reviewing applications and understanding what's needed, what's not, and what's working and what's not. As well as there's also the capital assessment reports. So those are released every 5 years, and I think that would also kind of integrate into kind of understanding a little bit about what's happening with the airports and kind of matching the funding or the funding needs towards that as well. So that would kind of fall onto the grants and contributions team as well.
Thank you. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with ending slightly early. So, folks, it is a few minutes before 12. We are back at 1 o'clock for the TELUS group. So have a good lunch, and we'll see you back then. Thank you very much.